Everyone, kia ora tātou. We're ready to begin after a karakia from Tame, please. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, ko te manu kāhui, ka nei te mihi atu. Kia koutou, koutou mai te hāpori kia koutou ngā mema o te prehi, e kohi hoi i ngā kōrero tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou, me ngā ringawera hoki tēnei te mihi atu. E te atua kahara wa koenei mātou e piri ana ki a koe, kia pāo mai tō ringa aroha ki runga i a tātou i tēnei rangi, me ngā rā kei mua i a tātou. Arehi mātou i runga i te tika me te ponu, te hore e kōtiti tēnei waka o te aroha, i roto i ngā rua o te pauri. Koenei mātou e whakawhetai ki a koe, kia manakitia te hāpori o kirikiri roa, o Waikato me te whare o te ki. Ki te hunga ko whetiu rangi tia, ngā mate, kei tēnā wāhi, tēnā wāhi, tēnā wāhi, kei tā wāhi hoki, moi mai ruki te ariki. Kia koutou e kimi ana i ngā kaupapa, hei paenga mō kirikiri roa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, i te manu kā.
Thank you. Thank you, Tami. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This should be a fairly straightforward council meeting to consider some of the changes proposed in the development contributions policy. And councillors, we've had a couple of discussions about that before, so we're aware of what changes are in. And it isn't a broad scale change. There's some changes, and obviously we consult with the public on that. We'll be taking. I'll be reasonably generous because it's quite a complex issue, and it's one that is important that we get right with questions, but the questions must be for clarity so that you understand what the oral submitters are saying, and then we will have table the report, the insights report, and we'll go around the council at that stage to gather up what you need to know or your first thoughts about that ahead of the decision making on the 30th of June. So this isn't a decision making, this is an exploratory. It's our chance to really understand in detail. So thank you very much for that. And we're going to go straight in. There are apologies to be presented. And Councillor O'Leary, whose father had an unfortunate fall, but he's going to be okay. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Pascoe and Councillor Donovan is going to be here for part of the time. So with that, I'll move that the apologies be accepted. Deputy Mayor Taylor seconds. All in favour. Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda, it is as it is circulated. I'll move that the agenda be accepted. Councillor Hamilton seconds. All in favour. Opposed? Carried. Any declarations of interest? I can't imagine there are because we've had this topic before. No, being none? Okay, then we will start. We're going to start on the submissions, and then Greg will come forward and talk about the insight report. That's the way we're going to go, isn't it? It's got your name by it. Development Contributions Submission Report.
Yes, we'll just go straight into the submissions.
But we'll go straight into the submissions, so time to sort that little detail. Thank you. Okay, Roger, you're first on our list. Welcome. Thank you for the time that you put into this, and you're a regular submitted council. We appreciate your input into city affairs. Thank you.
Just returning the thanks, Chair, Madam Chair. I'm opposing the partial remissions for state integrated schools proposal for the reasons I've given, and I just want to elaborate on those. Clearly, the education that received is at a state integrated school is quite different from that from a state school. I went to both. I went to state integrated schools, or wouldn't be termed those. And then following that, I then attended state schools. So the education is quite different. At the time, I corporal punishment was used prolifically at the state integrated school. So the strap was used quite frequently, and that profusely, it may shock some of the councillors here today. Clearly, the opponents supporters of the proposal argue that the moral issues have largely been resolved and we're all on the same page in terms of education for our young. It's clearly not the case if we just saw the news this week about what's happening. The Supreme Court of the United States has overturned a significant act now prohibiting abortions federally in America. So to argue that the state integrated schools are ready to accept public, even partial public participation in its activities is quite wrong, because these debates are still being held. They're opposing views, conservative and progressive views, which are contentious, and for that reason, state integrated schools, and I went to a Catholic school, so I was keenly interested in what the Catholic diocese had to say on this topic. The state integrated schools need to retain their autonomy, and that would be put under pressure, significant pressure, if public were allowed to use their facilities in the weekends and after school. I believe that state integrated schools need to protect their traditions, and for this reason should reject the option of accepting a partial remission, because that would make them, if we just have a look at what's the government is introducing a relationships and sexuality education guidelines into schools, and state integrated schools may have quite a different view on that topic, and for that reason I believe that public participation, if we want to draw the state schools and state integrated schools closer together, why don't we encourage a Catholic, a priest, to come and give the karakia at least once a year here in these chambers?
We're getting towards the end of your time, Roger.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Oh, sorry.
It's coming up as 7, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
I haven't done it. I know I prefer to be called 6. So long as I know.
Roger, I'm not sure at all about the Catholic priests, but leaving that one aside, isn't the proposal that it effectively make it voluntary for such as a Catholic school, that if they don't want to let any of their facilities be used by the public, they don't have to apply for a remission?
It's all directed from the Vatican.
Sorry,
it's all directed from the Vatican, what they have to say. If the Vatican says that...
I don't know what you're talking about, sorry.
Sorry, the Pope decides what the guidelines, sets the guidelines for how Catholic institutions operate. Includes the schools as well as the churches. I'm just not wary of having that sort of approach, because from my experience,
no, that's
they will consult
my question wasn't that. Yes. It said, isn't it voluntary whether a school a Catholic school or any other integrated school would apply for remissions? Isn't that what the policy proposes?
Well, that's using words, but we...
Well, I'm asking, is it voluntary or not? If it's voluntary, it's not being forced on them
Well, it's been...
by the council.
I don't agree with you there. I think it is being forced on them if you can proceed with the proposal, because all the schools are going to have to through economic necessity. In some ways, I'm trying to encourage further debate on this matter. On the 17th of March, although you've consulted widely, on the 17th of March, the discussion here in council was all done on Zoom. So, if we could sort of approach this from a different angle, I realise that
I think we're straying somewhat here. I guess Councillor
I thought I was. Yes, I'm sorry.
Councillor McPherson's question was just
I
whether
think
you
I've addressed it,
understood
yes.
that a state integrated school does not have to apply for remission, but may apply for a remission. That was your question. That was the only question.
I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is that some of the state integrated schools, such as for Islamic schools, may wish to take a completely different approach.
Any school may apply for the remission, but they may equally choose not to. That was the point. That was the only point you were raising, wasn't it, Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Anyway, I think we've probably transgressed that enough. But
All right then. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? No, thank you. Thank you for coming, and you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the debate if you
All
wish.
right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, now we have Grant Stewart of the St Joseph's Catholic School. Welcome. You are welcome to take off your mask if you feel comfortable.
That's right, thank you. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Hato Hohepa taku kura, ko Stuart taku whānau, ko Grant taku ingoa, ko Tamuaki of Hato Hetoa. Warm greetings to you all. My name is Grant Stewart. I'm the principal of St Joseph's Catholic School, Fairfield, and we are a state integrated school. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The submission is based on our understanding of the developer's charges and the interpretations of those proposed changes. Aroha mai, if our interpretations are slightly out. The purpose of this kōrero is to express our school community's support for the proposed introduction of partial remissions for state integrated school developments. The purpose is also to tautoko the mahi done by the Catholic Schools Office in this space too. Our community likes the idea put forward by councillors about the proposed introduction of a discount or a remission in the policy on DCs for developments done by state integrated schools. The why is what we support, to help create a level playing field where there is clear community benefit and access to facilities against which the remission is sought. There aren't many state integrated schools in Hamilton compared to state schools, so we feel it's important that our voice is added to the conversation. The reality is our school is funded, the reality is we are a school and our funds are always limited. The integration agreement means our funding and development essentially comes from the taxpayer. The Catholic diocese submission will go further into that detail around that. As a school, we're always looking the best way to spend our money wisely, especially with building projects. The building projects that we undertake help deliver educational outcomes for our students and our communities. Our community stretches from Claudelands in the south through to Rototuna in the north, from Queenwood in the west through to Greenhill Park in the east. One of the statements in the why is that there is clear community benefit to access to the facilities. Our school and the grounds and facilities are available to the public outside of school hours. That ranges from our sports fields to our playgrounds and includes our meeting and classroom spaces. One day, hopefully, a community hall as well. By changing some of the rules and regulations for schools so that they are consistent, whether it's state or integrated, is what we'd like to see. This would mean we can get more for our money. Our school is committed to being part of the community and allowing access for our facilities. That's why we are working with Sport Waikato and Hamilton City Council and with the mahi that Dr. Damien Puddle is doing through local play advocacy around developing a system to enable equitable access to active spaces for our communities. Our work in this space has been promising, and we're hoping to continue this relationships. The initiative takes pressure off council to provide spaces and facilities for the community. We know all the pressure the council is under from ratepayers, all wanting these wonderful community facilities, but they don't want increases to their rates. At the previous school I was at in Cambridge, we had a swimming pool, a hall, and a multi-sport turf. The swimming pool was used by the local swim club to provide learn to swim lessons. The hall was used by local dance groups and exercise groups. The turf was used by local sporting clubs as training bases. These are examples of how state integrated facilities can be used by the community for benefit for all. My aim is to do the same here in Hamilton, and that is why we've started working with Damien and the council. Often the biggest stumbling blocks are council fees and the cost of consents. For example, we're currently looking at putting a sunshade over our playground. This will benefit both the students and our communities, so that the playground could be used outside of hours over the summer periods. Council fees, if they were put onto certain structures, put the prices up for these sorts of projects and make it difficult when it comes to fundraising. Sometimes the council costs are almost the same as the projects themselves if resource consent is involved. One of the big projects that our community is looking to do is build a hall that is for wider community use. Developers' charge could have a big impact on this and mean that the project is scaled back because of restraints of funding available. Looking further into the future, our Catholic school network in Hamilton is full, and there are waiting lists for each school. Our network needs the ability to grow, and one of the stumbling blocks is the developers' charges. I just want to acknowledge the council for starting this process. I know that some of my colleagues in the state will state that it should be more or should be done differently, but I think it's important to acknowledge the council for having this conversation and trying to create a level playing field. Every dollar saved in compliance costs is a dollar that we can help use for educating our tamariki. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher has a question.
Obviously acknowledge the excellent work you do in terms of your school community and Catholic integrated schools. Your submission appears to be slightly at variance with the diocese submission. Can you just clarify that?
From my understanding is that the diocese is actually going for a further, I think they're almost looking for full remission on projects. It's my understanding is why they're trying to, theirs is a different stance from ours.
So they've obviously discussed that with you?
I saw the documents last week, yeah, after our submission was already put in.
Okay.
Yep. So we're really happy that when the documentation was sent to us from council, we were really happy with that, the fact that there was a conversation and the councillors were looking at it.
Yeah.
The Catholic school office is looking to go further, and they're looking at the integration agreement.
Sure. So you're happy with that, obviously, because it's from your diocese, but
Yeah. So there's so we're really happy. Our school community is really happy that the councillors here have decided to look at it.
Yeah.
And take it on board. The diocese would like to go a step further.
What's your average charge fees for your students?
So our fee, we're free fees because we're in the school donation $150 scheme with the government. The attendance dues, which is collected by the diocese, that's what they collect. That doesn't come to us. It's about $450.
A bit different to one of the schools I've been looking at. No, that's excellent. I mean,
yeah.
Certainly different from the diocesan school, the Anglican one. But anyway, that's...
Yeah, they're different rules and regulations.
But this is a thing for me, and I want to acknowledge, I think, totally, that there's never any financial barrier for any student to attend your school.
Martin, we're in questions for clarification.
Well, it's a public good. It's a public good question. So it's a public good question, Madam Chair.
It's not a question. If it's a question, ask it. Otherwise, you can say it later.
Can you confirm that your school is totally focused on fees never ever being a barrier to entry to your school?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Sarah.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your submission. I'm just wondering, Grant, in terms of the community hall or the school hall that you would love to build, and then also the work that you're doing with Dr. Damien Puddle. If you could expand on that in a little bit more in terms of how you could see that benefiting the broader community, given the focus of this remission on that broader community benefit?
Yeah, so the broader community, so we, Dr. Damien came in and we had a meeting around this, and we looked at the parks, the local parks around by us and our school, and where the development had been, and obviously we were, I think, far enough away from the Fairfield Park with that 2K radius. So in terms of our school playground, it provided playground space for the community at that end of Clarkin Road and that end of River Road as well. And then in terms of the community hall space, I mean, you've obviously, the council's doing a wonderful job in trying to rebuild the Fairfield community centre down at Fairfield Park. But obviously, think space like that's in high demand now, particularly with all these different groups popping up, from dance groups to exercise groups and that kind of thing. So there's always demand on space, and for the wider community, they can use it for a range of activities. You name the activity, you could probably do it in that space.
Okay, cool, thank you. And I look forward to seeing some more of the outcomes of that work with Dr. Damien Puddle as well, because it's a great initiative. So thank you for working with them on that. Cheers.
Thank you. There are no further questions, so thank you very much, Grant, for coming in. We appreciate you taking the time and the clarity of your submission.
Cool, thanks heaps for that.
Thanks. Next up, we have Ellie, who's known to us all. And you're talking on behalf of the Hamilton Multicultural Services Trust.
Thank you, Paula. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ellie Wilkinson toka ingoa. And yes, I am talking on behalf of Hamilton Multicultural Services Trust. I just wanted to acknowledge I've got Richard Kane here with us today. Who's,
feel free to come forward.
Who's on a board. He said he's happy to sit behind me. So, thank you for the opportunity to provide a verbal submission to Council regarding the Development and Contributions Policy. This policy has the ability to make a positive impact on the population of Hamilton, which, along with other we and other community organisations serve, and have either current or future plans for capital investment in new buildings and infrastructure to meet the needs and growth of services across communities. I wish to talk to one of the proposed specific changes, which is introducing a partial remission for development undertaken by state integrated schools that provide public access and community benefit. The reason I want to talk to that is I'm seeking Council to give consideration to include the development undertaken by community and not-for-profit organisations like ourselves in this policy. The Trust is focused on a significant development, and I've brought along with us a PowerPoint which shows our footprint and the future building that we hope to do. So we're focused on the significant development, which is the refurbishment and extensions of the current facilities at the Settlement Centre Waikato. This development project will have a positive impact for the individuals, families, community organisations and agencies supporting settlement and improved outcomes for newcomers and existing migrant and refugee communities in Hamilton. The extension and refurbishment will provide a fit-for-purpose space for ethnic communities to engage and connect to services which support their goals of making Hamilton their home and a city where they feel welcome and a sense of belonging and can contribute. As you'll see with the drawings, our new and refurbished building will be a welcoming space on the inside and also visually appealing, and making a statement with the cultural panels to be designed by ethnic communities on the outside. And I think the next slide will show you what it will look like, which we're very excited about. Many members of Council have visited the Settlement Centre over the years and are aware that it's a community hub, a collaborative space, and is unique in New Zealand. What is less exciting is, sorry, I'll just go back. I just went a bit too far ahead of myself. I'm leading this project for the Trust, and to date we've secured resource consent and building consent. Thank you to the Council. We've worked really closely with you to achieve that. So we're really excited about those milestones and bringing this building to a reality. What is less exciting is the letter I recently received, which states that the Trust will be required to contribute $158,691.97 as a development contribution to the city as the result of this building development. $158,691.97 is a lot of money. And I don't know if you even know that's how much we've been asked to contribute. I'm not sure how the math is done. However, within this, there's a figure of $72,000 which is the amount of contribution for transport. Interestingly enough, I'm not sure how that comes about because the car park that's directly outside our building is not included in our footprint, and we do not have exclusive use of it as a Hamilton City Council car park. So the building development is funded from trust reserves built over a number of years with this specific project in front of mind. It's also supported by grants from funders who not only believe in the goals of the trust, but also the trust's ability to make this building happen. The Settlement Centre provides access to the public and is of community benefit. It contributes to the goals of Hamilton City Council Community and Development Strategy and Welcoming Plan. One of the social development outcomes is inclusive community engagement, where we provide opportunities for our diverse communities to participate in civic life, and the building facilitates that. Community capacity, which is outcome 2, where we provide a culturally responsive service to support communities to improve their own well-being. Again, this facility supports that. Outcome 3, activating public spaces where we have high community use in our places and services because they are safe and welcoming. There are 160 ethnicities in Hamilton, and our ethnic makeup has and continues to change. The performance outcomes, which are illustrated in our annual report, show that the Settlement Centre makes a valuable contribution to ethnic communities and therefore is of significant benefit to the city. And while I really embrace the remissions, what I'm seeking is your consideration and recognition of the value of and the benefit that would happen if we include community developments like the Settlement Centre as a relevant and integral part of the remissions within the development contributions policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher has the first question.
Can you just give us the figure that you've received and your preparation, or were you surprised by that figure?
I was incredibly surprised. Last year we got an indication that it might be 135,000, and then the letter I received in March said it's landed at 158,000. 72,000 for transport, 62,000 for wastewater, 23,000 for water, and only a little tiny $614 for stormwater. So that's where it all comes from.
So what previous sort of conversations had you had, you know, from an organisational point of view, what previous conversations had you had? Because you're obviously expressing surprise.
Look, we recognise that there would be the need for us to provide some contribution because of the development. I think we were just surprised at the amount that was required for this project. Our feeling is that we are making a contribution to the city. We're not asking City Council to fund this. We're looking to fund this ourselves and from funders and other people who have indicated they want to contribute to the project. And when I look at the total cost of the building and what $158,000 could do, I mean, that's literally us outfitting a fit-for-purpose kitchen. That's where that sits. Yeah, so I think a partial remission and being considered for a partial remission would be fabulous. No contribution at all would be awesome.
So basically, in that sense, your submission would line up with the Waikato Catholic Diocese who would want a full remission, but at the bare minimum, you'd want a partial.
Yeah, a bare minimum partial. Yeah, I mean, we totally understand council has costs, and we get all that. But I think we're looking that we're doing something for the greater good and supporting, communities who I believe and our experience are under-resourced anyway. Yeah.
And obviously, everyone knows the crucial role that this facility will play for a part of our community. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, the needs in our settling communities are, we know COVID's impacted everybody over the last 2 years, but, we know that our migrant and refugee communities have been hit particularly hard through this period, and through vaccine rollout, under-resourcing for vaccine rollout, under-resourcing for understanding the health requirements, all sorts of things. And the Settlement Centre has held that space really well. and we've led that work so that the communities who are on the fringes and not resourced and included have been included and have been supported, and that's got to be a good thing for our city, and it's got to be a good thing for our communities across the whole, across everywhere in the city. Yeah, so I think. Yeah, we do extremely well here. We are quite unique in New Zealand to have this space and have this collaborative sector and hub of services. So I guess I want council to maybe give consideration to that when I get a bill for $158,000.
Yeah. So at the bare minimum, while we're legitimately looking at integrated schools, including the Waikato School, Dawson School for Girls, and others, at the bare minimum, you want to be on the same page with educational institutions.
Yep, absolutely, bare minimum. And look, I'm here speaking for the Trust, but I have networks of other organisations who are wanting to build and extend community facilities, and, you know, costs. I think we've spent $300,000 so far and we haven't put a spade in the ground yet. You know, that's on consultation fees, consent fees, etc., etc. So every cent that we spend there takes it away from how we can fit out this building. Yeah.
Right,
No,
thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Paula, and thank you, Ellie, for your submission. I'm interested, have you given thought to how broad you think the council, if it was to extend this to, say, community focused facilities, how broad that would go, because that seems like potentially a difficult line to draw in terms of where we're seeing measuring benefit or the type of non-for-profit organisation. Interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, and I have thought about that, you know, and selfishly I just think about us, but I have thought about the wider picture, and I do, you know, you are possibly opening up a can of worms, because, you know, if you allow for one community organisation identifying this benefit, then there's a lot of other cases that could be made for that, and I guess, so I think if we could meet somewhere in the middle and say, well, we acknowledge there is a benefit, this is a way the council could contribute to that building or that development by having at least a remissions or a lesser cost.
Thank you. And just the other part of my question was around looking at that $70-something thousand cost around transport. So that's presumably looking at the impact that having a larger footprint will have on the number of people visiting the centre, and then the impact that has on the network. So would you be open to the idea of a travel plan for the centre in terms of it, and what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so that kind of exists. A lot of our community who visit the centre will already travel by bus, or we have our cycle training program. They travel by cycle. They share vehicles. They get dropped off. We use vans to pick up clients. I don't believe our footprint is going to have a significant impact on how people actually come to the centre anyway. What we need the centre for is expanding our services and the facilities and improved facilities for people who come into the building. And like I say, we don't have ownership of the car park, so any extension of the car park and increased parking, that's a council decision, that's not included in our footprints.
So you don't see this actually increasing demand in terms of vehicle movements?
If there was an event there, yes, you know, because we're building a space where we could facilitate events for ethnic communities, which they're really desperately looking for. So yeah, on an occasion where we would hold an event, but there's events on the park all the time where traffic's lined up down the road and around the corner, etc., and the council open up the park to allow for increased parking. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Thank you. Sorry. I will take the question, Councillor Day. Sorry, apologies.
I've only got one question. It's an actual question too. Have you been advised by our staff in any discussions about this that you could, even under current policy, apply for a remission of that amount?
I have had conversations with your staff about the ability to have a remissions. I've talked to some councillors about it, and I know there's a process to go through, but this was also an opportunity for us to be included in consideration, not just for state integrated schools, but community.
So either way, we're going to hear back from you on that subject.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you to both for coming in and.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
that snuck up there, Councillor Hamilton, but off you go.
Thanks. It was a follow-on from Councillor Dave, actually, but that's sort of been asked and answered, and I'm keen to explore how we might help facilitate that later. But a question I'd probably ask now, I'm being devil's advocate a little bit, but in terms of, do you receive any other grants from council that could be used in this context as offsetting potentially?
No. We do receive grants from council. We have an operational grant that supports the running of the building and the maintenance and the ongoing use of the facility, which we subsidise. So that doesn't meet all the costs of the building, but it contributes significantly. So I wouldn't see that would go some way to funding the building.
Yeah.
That just keeps us operational.
And, sorry, what is that amount? Do you know?
Yes, we've just had our 3-year renewed for 90,000, and that was based on the bigger imprint in the bigger building going ahead, with the intention that within 3 years we'll have this bigger building in space.
Is that per year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Next on our list, we have Logan and Brian, who are both on Zoom, as I see. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Kia ora koutou. Good afternoon, Mayor Paula, councillors. Good to be here with you again. I am Brian Square. I am the chair of Property Council Central North Ireland branch, and I have my colleague Logan Rainey here as well with me to assist me, and Logan is with our advocacy team. And we just really appreciate being able to share a little bit of our perspectives on this development contribution change proposal, an update proposal. So thank you very much for your time. What I'd just, as a backdrop to this, I'll just share a couple of things. Property Council is the second largest sector in the Waikato. Property is the second largest sector in the Waikato, providing employment for over 18,000 local residents and contributing 2.8 billion to the GDP of the Waikato. We advocate for almost 90 Waikato-based member companies. We connect property professionals. Our tagline purpose is together shaping cities where communities thrive. So assisting Hamilton City to thrive is why I'm involved, frankly, and why we value our working relationship with the Hamilton City Council greatly. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And I just want to dive into some matters. There's some matters that we may be concerned about, and some matters we want to really support and to acknowledge as beneficial in our view. So regarding, firstly, if I may just dive straight in, regarding firstly the proposed changes to stormwater development contributions. Property Council supports the proposed reduction in development contributions for the multi-level dwellings noted with 4 or more bedrooms. The proposal will serve, we believe, as an incentive for development of higher density residential typology. This aligns with, as you know, aligns with both central government as well as local government ambitions. And Hamilton needs quality density, good quality density, and we believe, amongst other things, not part of this discussion, amongst other things, we believe this proposal moves us in the right direction for that. Changes to gross floor area definitions. We tend to have a simple approach here, and that is simply that our stance considers any area of a property that has a tangible impact on the demand for infrastructure should be included. Equally, any area of a property that does not have a tangible impact on demand for infrastructure should be excluded. Quite a simple approach. I know things aren't quite as simple all the time, but that's how we approach this. And we do this because the purpose of development contributions is to help fund the cost of new core infrastructure to service growth our view is consistent here with the Local Government Act. Therefore, our concerns on this relate to potential charges on canopies, outdoor structures, and commercial parking issues. When we look at these through the lens of tangible effects, for example, whether or not a house has an outdoor structure or canopy does not impact the number of people potentially living in that house. We're not talking, for example, about an additional bedroom or another bathroom. So we do not see an impact on the demand for infrastructure and don't see the need for development contributions to be levied on this portion. In the same way, we do support the intent of the proposal to exclude building overhangs and eaves from the definition of gross floor area, GFA. Building overhangs and eaves do not have a tangible, same lens, do not have a tangible impact on the demand for infrastructure, and we commend Hamilton City Council for seeking to remove them. There is one matter, in our opinion, that could be improved here. The district plan calls for retail premises to have canopies. It's a requirement. A cursory glance at most ground floor, street level retail premises, be it in the central business, central city area, wherever, cursory glance indicates that more commonly, a street level canopy is somewhere between 2.4 and 3 meters wide, rather than the 1 meter, which is proposed for, I guess, a dispensation, if you will. We recommend, therefore, that all ground floor, the whole, whether it's 1 meter or it's 3 meters wide, it all should qualify and be excluded from that levy, not just the 1 meter, which, by the way, 1 meter at 4 meters high on street level does very little to affect any sun shading or rain shading. And we don't want to see unintended consequences with weird stuff happening on street frontages with canopies that do nothing, but are there to simply gain some development contribution benefit. So we think there's something there that should be addressed, and that all overhangs should be excluded. Any increase in demand for infrastructure is directly related to the floor area. So obviously then, the larger the floor area, the greater the demand, and vice versa. This relates to the commercial parking development contribution proposal. The proposed definition could potentially, and this is just perhaps when we think a little creatively here, it could potentially result in a development contribution being levied on an empty lot that is used for commercial parking, albeit for maybe 4 years whilst funding comes together for a commercial development, whatever. If it is used for commercial parking, a development contribution could be levied on that empty lot. This, we believe, would be inequitable and be a cost paid for by locals, or the Hamiltonians. We would make the point we support the proposed exclusion of temporary structures from the definition of gross floor area for similar reasons. Temporary structures provide a range of benefits to us all, and the impact on the demand for infrastructure is temporary at best. In conclusion, Property Council and our members are passionate about the future of Hamilton. I believe you know that from previous submissions. We believe in the importance of developing and retaining a great built environment for us. And we'd like, in conclusion, to thank you for the opportunity to speak and for where we can contribute in any way to shape policy and outcomes. So thank you very much. And naturally, myself and Logan are happy to field any questions.
Thank you very much for your input. This question from Councillor McPherson to begin.
Kia ora, Brian, thanks. And I didn't know Scots supported cricket, so good on you there. Just a question on your commercial parking thing, and I'm not sure that I've fully understood your proposition, but it seemed, but correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't commercial parking, even if it's an empty lot, providing commercial parking, impact on usage of the transport network and therefore should have a cost levied against it, at least the transport component of DCs?
Perhaps there's an argument for a portion, Councillor David?
Sorry?
Perhaps there's an argument for a proportion, Councillor David. Yeah, just in principle, the sort of carte blanche, and carte blanche is the wrong term, the more generalised approach that's been proposed, we just see some unintended consequences there, to be honest.
So targeted for the transport element, but not the others. Would that be a fair?
We believe that, well, I believe that would be a fairer approach.
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further questions. You were quite straightforward and very detailed submission. Logan, you're happy? Nothing you want to add or anything?
No, happy with what Brian's presented to you guys today.
Thank you very much. We appreciate.
Many thanks.
We appreciate the input and time that the Property Council takes to work with us on these matters. Thanks.
Many thanks. Okay.
Thank you
thanks
very much. We appreciate our relationship with the city as well.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So the next submission is Colin Jones. Thank you. Hi, Colin. How are you? Good. And you'll see, councillors, that was a submission actually on diligent.
Pardon?
On diligent.
I was going to ask, I couldn't see it. It's not, I'm on diligent.
It's under the tag written submissions. Should be the first one.
Yeah, that's right. I'm there.
Oh.
Oh, I see. It's a separate. All right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Brian.
Cool.
Thanks.
Just take a moment to get myself organised.
You know, that's all right. We won't start the time until you're ready.
I did actually ask for 15 minutes, not the 10 minutes. Right, well, thank you. I've been looking at this council accounts and their development contribution policy seriously over the last couple of years, and I believe, to put it bluntly, that your development contribution policy is fundamentally flawed, and I do not think it is fit for purpose. I've given spreadsheets that I only finished this morning, and I've given some printed copies that might help you. I've actually gone back to 2006. I only brought 4 copies. What I've done is I've gone through your council accounts, and I've actually gone back through the notes of the accounts, which, because of the accounting formulas being changed constantly over that period of time, makes it very difficult. But what we've got is we've got a major problem in as much as that you have never been able to achieve enough income from your development contributions policy. And there's some significant shortfalls on a year-by-year basis. So the spreadsheet that I've just given you, that I forwarded about 3 hours ago, I noticed when I was just leaving there was a mistake in 2015, but if we start from 2014, I think is probably the relevant place, because that's when the accounts were changed and where the DCs. So what I've done is I've actually done, prior to 2013, additions and vested assets were actually all lumped together. Prior to 2014, there was a separate note in the accounts for vested assets. So it makes it quite clear. From 2014, for example, you received 16 million in development contributions, and there was a shortfall of 36 million. 2015, shortfall of 16 million, and then it just carries on. 2016, 7 million, goes right the way through. Every year, you've had a significant shortfall between what you're getting in development contributions and what your actual vested assets are. Now, I've looked at your depreciation as well, and that's also another subject. And of course, what I've discovered, and I regularly talk to my guy at Treasury and also at the Ministry, and the Three Waters legislation is coming about purely and simply because you've been underfunding infrastructure. I'll read out my report, and then because of the time involved, there'll probably be a few questions. It is my submission that the current policy is not fit for purpose.
It is therefore my conclusion that instead of tweaking the policy, that the parties having the necessary expertise should consider alternative policies that meets the Council's objective. My reasons are: Hamilton City is using private developer agreement with confidentiality clauses to override the DC policy, and I've actually done an OIA, it's referred to as A. There will continue to be conflict with the DC calculations as they are not transparent. There is likely to be a significant shortfall in revenue in the event of a recession or slowdown. And if you look at my report that I've given you in the 2006 to 21, in 2008 to 2010, the DCs basically dropped off the planet. And we're talking about here 2008, your DCs dropped down to 5 million, 5.8 million, whereas the previous year they were 15 million, I think, from memory. And the DC charges, they're based on your methodology you're using. The DC charges are based on assumptions that are unrealistic, and these assumptions are then modified to meet the objectives of the annual and long-term plan, i.e. projected income. I've attached 3 documents, and I'm trying to make it simplistic for you because I know it's a very complicated subject. The first one is the DC review, and I've actually asked now, this is this document here. Now that's actually been prepared by an ex-employee of the council's that actually his speciality is development contributions. And he's given a guide to the inconsistencies in the guides, and he's also provided solutions on a point-by-point basis that the council should consider, because the current policy is a mess. The development contributions policy, this page here, that's actually been provided by another party, but that actually goes through all your council's accounts from 2000 right up to 2021 on your debt, your income, your rates, the development contributions that actually has been collected, and what your operating expenses are. And then finally what I've done is I've attached the depreciation schedule. Now, I haven't actually asked under an OIA, but I'd be interested to know what building on the council's balance sheet has been depreciated over 200 years. That, councillor, is the first line of the asset class. You're depreciating assets over 200 years. You have been underfunding depreciation for years. And I think that is part of the trouble of what we're in at the moment. You can't look at the DCs in isolation, because when we start looking at your accounts on the balancing the books exercise, you have your rental income, or your rates coming in, and then they subtract vested assets, and then they subtract their DCs. But if the assets aren't being depreciated at the right basis, it means that your books are actually being cooked, because you're underestimating what your expenses are, which means although you're showing theoretically a profit of 5.8 million last year, I would suspect if we got an independent forensic audit, it would show a huge loss. Okay, so what I've said here, number one, it's been the person that actually identified this actually is an ex-council employee. The development contribution is primarily designed to pay for vested assets and growth. Vested assets are usually gifted to the city at no cost. Then HCC determines the value to be incorporated into the HCC accounts. It is important that assets have a correct value. For example, land under roads is not valued by the developer, it is valued by staff. Now, for the last month, I've been trying to get to the bottom of how you arrive at roads. The staff are telling me that it's actually, the developers actually give them an invoice. Well, I've spoken to 3 developers, and the developers do not value roads. They provide you the asset schedule or the costs for the construction of the road, the construction of the lampposts, infrastructure, etc., etc. The road is a separate line in your balance sheet. And your road, you are not allowed to revalue your roads in your accounts. You can revalue your other assets, but not your roads. So there is an advantage from the staff's point of view to try and keep the roads at the top price to make the balance sheet look good. And what I'm suspecting, and I have yet to prove it, is if a raw block of land might be worth $50 a metre, but an adjoining section's worth $500 a metre, that the staff are putting the roads in at $500 a metre because it actually increases the assets in your balance sheet. That's why I'm suggesting that you need a forensic audit to look at your accounts, because I don't believe that you are getting correct information to make decisions on. The asset schedule I talked about, there's no building in Hamilton that's 200 years old that I'm aware of. I'd be interested to know what buildings the council have got in their balance sheet that are depreciating over 200 years. You're aware I've made numerous submissions over the last 4 years. I've endeavoured to make you aware that your council is not complying with the national policy standard, both the UDC and the UDC. I've now been vindicated, and my submissions have been proven correct. Now, you may or may not be aware, I made a formal complaint to Futureproof. Futureproof has now acknowledged in this letter that they are breaking the law. The ministry has commissioned an outside set of economists, Principal Economics. They have confirmed that Futureproof has been breaking the law. And Futureproof this morning sent me an email. I've made an offer to meet with their chairperson and their other parties, that they'll have a new review of their Futureproof document by the 16th of June this year. I presume you're aware of the Infrastructure Commission's report. That's compulsory reading to every councillor. It says the reason why housing is so unaffordable is because of planning and infrastructure. And finally, these are all government documents, by the way. The Infrastructure Challenge, that actually spells out that there is $104 billion of shortfall in infrastructure in New Zealand at the moment, projected to be $30 billion within 30 years. And I have yet to actually ascertain what the shortfall is in Hamilton. I've spoken to staff and they've told me it's going to be 18 months to 2 years for them to actually put cameras down all the pipes to know what the state of your pipes are. I'll try and wrap it up pretty quickly. So the economist that you're using, or Futureproof has been using, is Market Economics. Market Economics is the party that's provided you with the core data to provide to your development contributions policy. They are the ones that have actually been giving misleading information to Futureproof. The staff have confirmed last year, thereabouts, that a peer review has never been done of the development contributions policy. We know that private developer agreements are in place. For the last 6 to 8 years, HCC has been using private developer agreements with confidentiality clauses, and council has been refusing to release these documents. I'm aware of one instance, and I have this under an OIA, that the development contribution was supposed to be 4.6 million. The first developer had a special arrangement with the council, paid 3.2 million. A second developer then bought part of the property and he paid an additional 1.4 million. HCC received the full 4.6 million, but the first developer got a special agreement. And because it's a confidentiality, we do not know what that special agreement included. We know that there's about 40 private developer agreements. The council have confirmed that. They have yet to confirm how many have confidentiality clauses. So in summary, I believe that your development contribution policy is not fit for purpose, and I request that independent parties be appointed to coordinate a group of experts to examine and recommend alternative policies.
Thank you. Can you?
Yes, I'll only one final point.
Thank you.
Is your expert, or your previous expert, he actually understands the DC policy completely at Tauranga, and he has strongly recommended that the council possibly look at the model that the Tauranga Council are using as opposed to your policy.
Cool, thank you very much. We have some questions. So when you talk about tauranga, you're talking about current tauranga under commissioners, or you're talking previously?
No, I'm talking about the development contributions policy within...
Under the previous council, or?
I'm not sure, have they changed it with the commissioners in place?
I think they've been giving a good look at all their
I know they've been looking, and I mean, I've been told off the record that there's possibly collusion between staff and contractors, and that's the reason why it's turned out to be a bit of a minefield.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Colin, for your presentation. I'm just interested why I think it's sort of circa 20 years you continue to attack our policy. In fact, you called it a mess when 17 developers recently took us to court and were found that our policy on all accounts was upheld and they're not appealing.
Yes, clarification. I wasn't a party to that appeal. The reality was it was a very narrow appeal, and when I looked at the actual statement of claim, I thought it was unlikely they were winning because they only went under the Local Government Act. If they'd have incorporated the national policy statement, then you probably would have lost, because you do not... The national policy statement now overrides to a large extent what's in the Local Government Act, but they were only concentrating on the Local Government Act. I am aware of one court case at the moment that was heard in November against the council about the DCs, and I'll be interested to know. I spoke to the developer involved just before I came here. He has yet to hear the judgment, but he's suing the council for about $5.5 million,
okay,
as I understand it.
I'll follow your submission and raft of submissions with interest. Frankly, I find them confusing and contradictory. So my question is, what are you trying to achieve?
I'm trying to give you, as councillors, the best available information, accurate information, because you are clearly not getting accurate information. And I mean this to do with future-proof. I've been on this now for, 3-4 years. I keep getting knocked back by saying I don't know what I'm talking about. These documents that are government documents are now confirming everything I said is 100% accurate.
Okay, I'll look forward to pursuing that. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Colin. Just one point I want to tackle you on, maybe. Your issues about depreciation and
yes,
not being properly funded. You're aware, are you, that council's not required necessarily to fully fund depreciation, that there are other ways to meet the upgrade and maintenance costs and so forth through the ongoing budget, for instance?
Well, you've got to meet accounting standards, so you're probably meeting. I'm acknowledging that you're probably meeting accounting standards.
Yeah.
But I question how you can actually say that a building has a depreciation of 200 years.
Oh, yeah,
and
totally granted, but we don't have to meet all the depreciation costs.
Well, no, you do.
In an accounting sense, do we?
Yes, you do. You do. You do. And it's different interpretations of the accounting. So I've spoken to Frank Scrimmager at the university, and the problem is you've got different accounting standards that you can use to say we comply, but that doesn't mean to say it actually makes sense.
But the compliance doesn't mean that within any particular year you have to meet 100% of the...
Oh, no. I agree with that. I mean, we know that everything's going to depreciate.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. Just wanted to check that, Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Paula, and thank you, Colin, for your submission. Similar to Councillor Hamilton, I'm just trying to pull together the threads of your submission to understand, I guess, from a very high-level view. Are you saying that in terms of the way that we're calculating DCs, that you believe that they're too much? Or not enough? Because I understand your points around housing supply, needing to supply more infrastructure, etc. But I'm just trying to bring this back to the DCs, and you've criticised in several areas. But overall, what are you saying?
You still need income to service the city. Yeah. I'm not questioning that. What I'm questioning is the methodology. So when you start looking at the DC policy, it is opaque.
Yeah.
It is not clear as to why. I mean, this lady before me talked about, 160,000 in DCs and 70,000 for transport. Well, yeah, that policy is opaque. And what I'm saying is that you need people with expertise to say there are other alternatives to the current policy. Market economics has been giving advice to future-proof. The information, and I've got all the correspondence here between the Ministry and Market Economics and Future-Proof, where the Ministry has actually been questioning Future-Proof. They've been basically writing the reports to get the answers they want. Market economics have a vested interest to keep the current status quo. I'm suggesting that you need outside experts to look at the whole policy and say, is there a better method or methodology to arrive at funding the infrastructure costs?
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
All right, so your main concern is transparency, and in terms of market economics and their advice, that your concern is that that what they're saying is leading to an undersupply in infrastructure and housing?
Absolutely. Okay. And I mean, when the document comes out in June, the new future-proof document, it will be really, really interesting, because this report that was actually the review showed that there were 17 major points that future-proof failed on. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen this report. If you're happy, I'm happy to give you the link, because that is actually showing that future-proof has been breaking the law. It has been giving you as councillors misleading information for years.
When you're talking about future-proof breaking the law, because I have not seen any, I have read the other infrastructure and the Productivity Commissioner. I'm absolutely 100% aware of the shortfall in infrastructure, which we acknowledge is a New Zealand-wide problem. In terms of new future-proof breaking the law, future-proof is under review, you're right, and the report's coming out. In what ways is it breaking the law? It's a strategy. It's a strategy, and it doesn't.
No, it's been giving misleading information.
To whom?
To you as councillors.
To the three councils.
Yes, absolutely.
In what way has it been misleading?
Well, it's been telling you, I mean, I've gone back to the documents in 2008. It said that there was potentially 108,000 house sites in Hamilton. And that's the way that the planners have been telling you, that you don't have to spend any money on infrastructure because you've got 108,000 housing sites. What they failed to tell you is that to do that, you had to demolish everything that was there and build maximum on the then current zonings. Now, this three buildings, 3 units per site. The infrastructure you've got in place, the council have confirmed under an OIA that most of your infrastructure built prior to 2013 was built for 10 houses a hectare. 3 buildings, 3 dwellings on a site is 30 dwellings a hectare. In 2013, they upped the standards to 16 houses a hectare. We have not got the infrastructure to build the sort of dwellings that the government is talking about.
Yeah, so my question of that, I agree with you, but the NPS urban development, for example, is not retrospective. It came into effect when it came into effect. So the standards that apply now and the infrastructure burden that we have now wasn't evident necessarily before.
Well, no. See, Richard Briggs signed off a document in 2016 to the Productivity Commission to say that the council had identified all the infrastructure pinch points right throughout the city. I asked for a copy of that document, and they came back and said it did not exist.
Oh, I'm not going to enter into any of that. I don't know anything about it, and I know that's been a legal matter between you. But my interest is, yes, I am interested in you clearly articulating or sending us whatever evidence you have that Future-Proof has been breaking the law in its strategising around growth They have
been underestimating.
But that's not breaking the law, really, is it?
Well, by giving you misleading information, where do you draw the line? If you as councillors have been asked to make decisions on information that is factually incorrect, is that breaking the law or not?
You're saying it is. I'm not certain that I understand what it is you're trying to say there, because it is a strategy and it's a strategy under review, but I'll give that some thought anyway. Any other questions, councillors? No, thank you. We'll have to go because we have another person waiting. But thank you very much. And if you are able to send any such unequivocal evidence about Future-Proof our way, that would be most helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And the last speaker, I believe, and thank you for waiting, Graham. We appreciate it, is Graham Royal from the... Royal, is that how you say it? Brilliant. We can't hear you. You're on mute. But I saw you nod, so I was happy with that. Thank you, Graham. You're good to
Okay,
go.
I think that's all. Do we have Kate Barry-Pacino available as well? Or
Do we have what?
Kate Barry-Pacino, a member of our team?
Oh, she's coming in on Zoom now. She's coming in.
Okay, all right.
Just give it a second. We just got to let her in. Yes, she's here with us now. Thank you, on Zoom. In your hands, Graham.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this opportunity to present our paper. We've been working through this this issue on development contributions and equitability with the council for a number of years now. My role is essentially to manage the school property portfolio on behalf of the church. So I represent the proprietor for each of the Catholic schools. And in the case of within Hampton, Sacred Heart Girls College as well, which has a separate proprietor for them. From our perspective, the main areas that we want to cover. Actually, if I could just introduce Kate, are you there, Kate?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Would you like to just?
Good afternoon, councillors. My name's Kate Barry-Pacino. I'm a resource management barrister for the diocese, and I act for matters relating to their policy in various schools, both in the Bay of Plenty, Waikato, and throughout New Zealand.
Thank you. Kate, do you have a camera? Are you coming on camera? It's just...
I am. I'm just mindful that I have several people working from home in my household, and I don't want to glitch my presentation. So I will attempt to put it on.
Oh, I see.
But I'll...
Okay, it's just, it's good for an introduction to know who we're talking with. So thanks for that. And if it doesn't work and you go off again, that's fine.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. So Graham.
So Kate, do you want to just lead us into our paper?
Yes, there was just a couple of matters that I wanted to discuss with the councillors, really just to set some of the matters back on track, if you like, in terms of the legal context and scope of what we're dealing with. The first one really deals with matters that were raised in the Mr. Rogers submission. And whilst I don't want to be disparaging to Mr. Rogers or to comment on his age as such, I would remind the commissioners that it's important to note that the Private Schools Conditional Integration Act that came in 1975 may well have occurred after Mr. Rogers' education, but it made some important critical changes to Catholic schools in the experience that he may have had, and I similarly had, I might add. So rather than commenting just on his age, I'll comment on mine. And that is that integrated schools under section 4.1 of the Act became part of the state system of education in New Zealand. And that's a critical matter that is really at the heart of the diocese submission to you today, and by others integrated schools, that by that statute, they were forced to comply with the Education Act 1964 and now the Education Act 2020 in terms of those amendments that have occurred. And that's critical to understand if you consider why we're seeking for integrated schools to be treated the same as state schools, in the context that the Crown state schools are waived from requiring development contributions in recognition of the importance of Crown infrastructure, when in fact the schools and the education provided in the Catholic schools have to, as a matter of law, provide the exact same state education. The only difference is within that state education is the right for Catholic schools or any state integrated schools, and it may be related to religion, it may be related to another form of special character, is that they're entitled to add to that curriculum a special character value that might be represented within that particular integrated school and whatever aspect of that special character that particular school provides. So in that regard, the education and the needs that I have outlined to you and that are outlined in the diocese submission relate to the provision of curriculum and the requirements that the Ministry of Education regularly reviews and requires that all students in New Zealand be provided. And as those councillors that either have children or grandchildren or are aware of the communities, what education looks like today is very different than what it looked like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, most definitely when you or I were at school. And that means buildings change, upgrades change, expectations of the ministry are changing. And that means that schools, whether state or state integrated, need to continually review their buildings and their space for a number of aspects relating to what may be sports facilities, performing arts facilities, hall facilities, classroom facilities, health and safety matters such as toilets or otherwise. And again, that comes down to, does this council wish to treat on a different footing the education being provided to some members of its community compared to others to unfairly impose a burden on state integrated schools? And that's really what this policy comes down to. And under the development contributions policy, where you have non-residential development contributions policy, the predominant focus of that and the focus of that from local government at a national level is focused on matters such as retail, commercial, industrial, where in fact they are revenue gathering aspects. So where they create demand on infrastructure, they pay for that, but it's anticipated that they pay for that also from a commercial revenue return. That is not the case with a state integrated school. These students and those that are having the benefit, if you like, are part of this community. And that's the key goal that this submission is about, is understanding that these schools are in fact addressing growth created within your community, not from the school itself. The other aspect that I just wish to highlight is that one difference in state integrated schools that I think the councillors should be mindful of is that in state schools, they are very much centred within communities. And when we're looking at social equity, and I note that one of the councillors asked about the provision of education for all, one important differing factor of a state integrated school is that particular school doesn't have to be in a wealthy, affluent neighbourhood to provide a quality of education to all cohorts of a community, no matter what that social economic background is. And because it does just rely on a Catholic or connection to special education, there's also a provision for up to 5% of non-religious affiliated students. So that means that it gets a full range of people within a community, not just from the neighbourhood it sits within, which allows much greater social economic equity within those schools, naturally as a matter of course. And a final aspect of that is that the Hamilton City, and it's one thing that I would note coming from Tauranga, which is different, is that Hamilton is known for the quality of its school. It is something that you may wish to consider in terms of who you attract when you look at very mobile communities that are currently looking at perhaps moving out of Auckland and who you might wish to attract. Your schools are a selling point of your city in terms of the quality of its education and the quality of who you draw to your population and community base. And therefore, I would submit that you should consider very carefully around your policy being consistent with other cities and how it's managing state integrated schools, which are treating them equitably with state schools in terms of you having a similar approach. I'll now put you across to Mr. Royal. And if you have any questions to me, you could ask them perhaps after Mr. Royal speaks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to cover off, right? So from my perspective, the Catholic schools involved that I've got responsibility for represent around 4,000 students within Hamilton City, spread amongst the 5 primary schools and 2 secondary schools. We consistently come across the barriers associated with development contributions when we're bringing classrooms up to the code set down by the ministry, and in some cases providing the additional facilities or matching facilities in state schools that Grant talked about earlier, specifically from Fairfield St Joseph's in terms of multi-purpose. In general, our schools don't differentiate from their availability and access to the public on the same basis or access that would occur for a state school, and that's fairly consistently applied between our schools, right from St John's right through to St Pius and Melville, to any other one of them. I think, I'm happy to. We're happy to take questions from the group to clarify anything in respect to that. But we're very keen to put our point across in terms of equitability with state schools in regards to the costs that we incur.
Thank you. We're out of time now, so we're going to go into some questions. However, I'll allow some time for questions. We've got Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. A question to the lawyer whose name escaped me.
Kate.
Sorry,
Kate.
It was different. I can hardly see that. Anyway, you called us commissioners at the start of your speech, but we're actually councillors. It's only in the Tauranga basket case that they're commissioners. Look, you went into all the background arguments as though we'd never considered them. Have you seen any of our reports and discussions, minutes or anything of our
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Oh, good. Okay.
I have, and I've also read them. I've read them across various councils. I'm familiar with how councils have treated state integrated schools across New Zealand.
Yeah, so you'd be aware that we've already canvassed all of those issues that you raised. So what other jurisdictions councils don't charge DCs at all for developments at state integrated schools?
This matter is currently being reviewed around New Zealand, but the latest 2 that are being that are referenced within our submission are Napier and Hastings, I believe. But Graham, could you?
Hastings and Nelson specifically.
Do they no longer charge, or they never?
That's correct. That's correct.
That's what I was after. Thanks.
Could I also just add to that as a diocese we cross 14 territorial local authorities right through to Gisborne, and there's only 2 of those which charge us development contributions.
Which ones are those, Graham?
Hamilton and Tauranga.
Okay, thanks. You submitted, I don't know whether it was you personally, but the diocese did about 6 years ago in respect of a proposed Catholic high school in the Rototuna area, on the same subject. I'm not sure whether you were involved.
Primary school.
Yeah,
yep.
But that formed part of the recent discussions with us. Did the proposal is for a partial remission. I'm not sure whether you want us to even go ahead with that, because it's like an all-out attack from you on what I, as a proponent of that, would regard as an improvement. I'm not sure that there's any acknowledgement we're even moving in the right direction from you, or would you rather us didn't do that unless we were going to do the whole lot?
I would suggest that where you are reviewing policy, regardless of what's being proposed, I don't think that limits the scope. The issues are in front of yourself as councillors, and the rights of submitters to outline what the policy rationale is one, where if the rationale is logically applied, equitably and evenly across local government, then it should be that integrated schools are delivering the same education as state schools.
Yeah,
in regards to
I've asked you a specific question. I've not asked you for a philosophical discussion. Would you regard this as an improvement that should be supported at least in part? Or would you rather we didn't go here at all unless we were willing to go the whole way? Now, as a lawyer, you would expect a specific answer to a specific question, and I'm asking you that.
I think we understand the question. So this,
I'm not sure. With respect to Councillor McPherson, I consider that it's both rhetorical and slightly inflammatory. The question legally is one to which, in reviewing a policy, should you be outlining the logic and rationale for a full recovery? Obviously,
let's not talk over each other because that's really hard. I guess your view on it is quite clear in your submission, and Dave's had his question.
No, I haven't had an answer. Would they, if we went ahead with the proposal, would they regard that as an improvement along the lines of what they want, or would they rather us not go such a halfway house unless we were willing and able to go the whole way?
Okay, so if in a very short measure, if you can answer that question without taking it too far.
If you're saying, do you want some crumbs to be thrown at you when you're starving rather than a solid meal, then of course you take the crumbs.
Talk about winning friends and influencing people. Okay. I think I like the St. Joseph's principle better.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you.
Just keep professional in this room. Yeah, no, I understand your frustration.
I'm sure with the lawyer here, it will be professional.
I understand your frustration. Graham, have you got anything to add on this? No.
I mean, our proposal seeks equitability. That's what we're asking for at the end of the day. So, you know, if it's partial equitability, it's better than what we've got now, but that is not what we're asking for. We're asking to be treated equally.
Thank you. Councillor Naidu-Rofe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, you're obviously very well researched, and I picked up on your points of social equity, community benefit, and the such, and, you know, talking about equitable outcomes in terms of education. I was just wanting to know if you had an opinion or could pass comment on numerous submitters have suggested that the remission or partial remission be extended to cultural and religious centres who also provide educational classes of some sort. Would you have an opinion?
I heard this, yes, I heard the submission and I thought it had a lot of merit. I'm not sure if it sits within the proposed partial remission on state integrated schools or whether the council has a review or on development contributions generally. Most councils have a waiver remission policy relating to community facilities, and I'm surprised that Hamilton City doesn't have a policy related to that from what it sounds like in place already. And it sounded to me like the submitter has used this opportunity because hasn't had the chance thus far to get in front of the councillors to seek this. But I'm not sufficiently privy to the existing policy or exemptions that you have relating to those types of facilities. But all I can say is that it's common in other councils to create either a waiver remission policy relating to such matters so that they don't have to pay development contributions and recognition of that community and cultural contribution to a community.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor. One further question, Councillor Gallagher. Thanks.
For the record, as you would understand, a number of us have children who have attended integrated schools and are extremely familiar with the curriculum and with the process, and a deep admiration, particularly for our Catholic diocese, obviously, having experienced their wonderful education. Can I just a question to Graham, so that I'm clear, because the St. Joseph principle, in my view, gave a very positive submission, and I think what he said is that yes, we support the journey. It's a halfway, if you like. But Graham, do I take it you at least support the direction of travel, but the diocese would like us to go further?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's expended all of the questions, and thank you. We've gone over time now, so we'll leave it there. But we will be having some discussion, of course, with staff before it comes back for decision. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Interesting debate as always.
Interesting whose side we're on.
Ah, stop it, you two.
With friends like that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the submitters, the verbal submitters. And we'll now go to, so that's the public forum essentially. So we'll now go to item 5, which is over to the Development Contributions Review Submission Report, which is on a diligent, of course. And then we'll, this is the time for feedback, raising your questions and concerns so they can be reflected in the final report and the recommendations that will go to Council on the June the 30th, right? So, hello, thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. We will essentially take the report as read. As you will have seen, we did a really targeted approach at schools, particularly state integrated schools. And all of the details are in the submission report of how and who we targeted and the results that we got from that. And we will take the rest of the report as read and answer any further questions.
Oh, thank you. I think we'll just go through the questions as they come up. Councillor McPherson. Oh, there you go. Can't really see with those glasses. Yeah.
Sorry, look, just asking your indulgence, I've got some things I have to go and pick up some grandkids in about 5 minutes, but I just wondered if I could say what my questions are now, not expecting answers right now.
That we could, fine.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, in relation to the last submitters, could we have that definitive list of who does give remissions and whether it's full or partial? Just to clarify who at the moment does.
Yes,
absolutely.
I think we'll add in the community remission that she referred to as well.
Yep, that'd be great. In relation to Colin Jones' submission, that DC policy issues review, which he said was from a former HCC staff member, and the solutions that were in there, could you give us a comment on those not in too much detail, but enough to know whether it's something we might want to look at further or not from your viewpoints?
Yep, will do, yes.
And the other thing in relation to this big, which you can have my copy, where it says there's a shortfall in DCs. Now, I know that DCs have sometimes been below what we got was below what we'd expected, but we've been told in the past on some years they were above what we budgeted, but that's showing every year is below. So could a bit of reconciliation on that issue?
Yeah.
So he's saying our LTP said we get this and we always got less, but that's not how it's been put to us. There are at least 2 or 3 years where we got...
Yeah, we've been... I mean, I can answer that in like a few seconds, which is that, you take the model outputs, the model assumes that every single person pays a full DC for everything.
Yep.
So obviously there's a in taking that number and bringing the revenue that you see in your 10-year plan, that's what you expect to realise. So I think he's talking to the model output number, which of course is always higher than what you expect to get. So I don't think there's any inconsistency. He's just talking to an earlier
So just in terms of the purpose of this meeting together, the feedback, because we've got all councillors need to be across this. So if we can bring that answer again in a tangible form for councillors, that would be really good.
Will do.
The last question I had, Paula, is in relation to the Multicultural Centre. Hang on, I can't remember its latest title, but sorry, but on Boundary Road there, if they applied for a remission for that building that's proposed, there may not be a definite answer to this, but what would staff have recommended to us, Pat, if you get what I mean, you know, because I'm aware that other community facilities can apply, and or the developers have said this is going to be for a wider benefit to the community, you should give us a remission.
Yeah.
So if they did apply, what would you guys be recommending to us, or recommending within the system, because it may not come to us?
Yeah. So remember that the policy is...
the current policy.
Yeah. But the policy is agnostic to really the type of thing that's going on. It just knows with it what network impacts. So those decisions about if you have a social lens you want to apply in terms of a remission and that's a elected member decision. So it will just look at...
Yeah, but you've put to us options at times on that in relation to the social lens that you...
Yeah, we've talked about those things before. But yes, I'll look at, what is that development? In terms of if it just went through the typical procedure, would it be eligible for any sort of remission? That's your question,
So
essentially.
we sort of get a picture of what the difference would be now versus what they're asking for.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's understood.
So that-
Thank
that-
you.
that was mine,
Thanks, Dave.
thank you.
Appreciate that. Councillor Hamilton.
From Dave, so I'll just ask while Dave's there as well. Slightly different on the remission, but often we see developers, they go and get their DC tested with a third party and they say the transport won't be as much, so therefore they seek a remission, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's what Dave was specifically.
Yep.
Could we potentially, without changing the policy, resource a staff member to help them help community non-profits navigate that pathway so they don't have to go and pay 30 grand for a consultant? Is that something that, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but politically, if you had the support, that we could, it's a way of supporting them through that as a pathway rather than just giving them a discount or a blanket remission?
I guess expectations from those people would concern me a bit because, look, I haven't looked at that development, but broadly speaking, more floor area, more people turn up, that increases the average number of trips, transport trips on the network, so that equals more DCs. So often they do fit the the profile for paying DCs, whatever it is, whether it's a community centre or a preschool or an office building or a retail shop, because that's sort of the method. So if you're going to encourage them to go into a remission process, you sort of have to also be aware that often people aren't eligible for remissions just because they're doing stuff that puts trips on the network. So I think we're happy to help them navigate a process, but also want to make sure that they understand how likely it is that that'll end up in a reduction.
Yeah, so it's best to have an independent person potentially then.
Yeah, but yeah, and we verify the independent person, but again, the answer has to be that it's provable that they're going to be doing something quite different than the typical development.
Okay, and I guess in terms of creep with this DC policy, and to your credit, when we were testing this, you were sort of saying, where do you stop? And so now we're seeing community events, you get churches, schools. So this is one of the risks. We haven't quantified what can of worms we might open up if we go further than just this partial remission, eh?
Yeah, that's right. Is more, you make more things eligible for a remission, then you're going to be subsidising more development. But and it's for, if they're good reasons, that's for you to decide. Yeah.
The other thing, and I think Dave touched on it with Bryan Square, was the GFA and the car parking. So we're increasing the canopy and potentially the car parking element.
There's a misunderstanding here, which I need to talk to Bryan about, or and put it in the report. The definition of GFA is unchanged, except for a small tweak about canopies. So, but it was a legacy provision, so it's been around since 2000 and 15 years ago, and it just became a bit muddled. So what we did is just tried to reorder it so it was easier to read, but it didn't change anything.
And was that what the court actually asked us to do as well? That was one of
the court asked us to confirm in our policy our position around canopies, which is where we said 1 metre eaves, no DCs, any other canopy is DCs. So that was the court piece, and then
in doing that, we also tidied it up without having any, impact. But I think the Property Council and others have perhaps read that sort of, clarifying as meaning that we're doing something different,
Okay, and
which
just
we're
explain
not.
the car parking piece to me, because you've kind of bundled that. Could we unbundle it potentially? So deal with it as a separate issue?
All that car parking thing, it's actually where you got to Councillor McPherson, is if you're going to have people pay for car parking on a lot, you will pay a transport DC because you're attracting and putting trips on the network, and so obviously you don't pay for the other activities.
I wonder, when it comes back to the staff report, whether it'd be just worth separating that out so you don't lose, the whole baby with the bathwater, so we can individually look at those issues, because they don't need to be stuck together, do they?
No, well, they were stuck together, and we look. They need to be clear, and people need to be able to navigate it, which is what we were trying to achieve. But we've obviously got some more confusion here. So I think we need to just re-look at it. But I think the short answer is nothing's changed except that bit about the canopies. So we need to give the Property Council and anyone else comfort that the council isn't clawing in any more GFA to charge, isn't doing anything different.
So potentially you could do that offline before this comes back to council and just give us some confidence that that's been resolved.
I plan to call Brian and just.
Thank you.
I'm sure he'd be happy to have a chat. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Naidoo-Rowe?
The first one, in regard to the canopies, I noted that HCBA had a submission to not support the change, and that had something to do with extra costs for hospital businesses, with canopies more than a metre. I'm just a bit confused. Is that correct? Is her interpretation correct?
Did you want to answer that?
Vanessa's submission was that because the district plan requires there to be a canopy over a space, that they shouldn't essentially charge for it. And I think that was kind of her gist, that was her thing, but I think it's a standard policy across the whole city, so there's no differentiation for central city or retail, or where it's required by council under the district plan as opposed to an optional part of a design.
So do they currently pay?
Yes.
So does the change affect them in any way? Okay.
No.
Thanks. The other thing was, someone mentioned that for community facilities, do we have a waiver clause or something like that?
There is not a remission for community facilities, no.
But some councils do? Is that what?
We'll investigate.
Yeah, no, I did some research on this. There are a few, but not many, was my recollection. Wellington had something specific. So we'll have to go. We're going to do that just as part of this next piece of research, but we'll come back to you on that.
Awesome. I'd be interested, in those findings and what you mentioned with Dave. The not right now, but the possibility of applying that social lens, and whether we need to have a discussion or a briefing or something, rather, just to understand the how how some of the costs are calculated, like with HMS talking about 70K in transport costs and things. Just for our understanding, I think it would be quite useful to know, how it's calculated, and then if it is opening up a can of worms, then discuss, what set of criteria do we need to look at to restrict remissions or waiver or whatever it is that comes out of that. Yeah.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's always the trade-off question. You either the developer, those that cause the need for the new infrastructure, pay, or the existing ratepayer pays. So I think that's always the other side of the ledger. So
exactly.
And that's
and
that's
just
the trade-off.
how do you measure community benefit and social impact? I mean, those are all huge questions.
Yeah,
which we can talk
hard
about
questions.
later.
Councillor Gallagher.
Raised most of them, I think, particularly on Vanessa's point from the HCBA. The issue of public access. And I'm not opposing my good friend, the Waikato Diocesan School, but I'll just give you an example. We've had a submission from the Settlement Centre, right, with their incredible development and who their clients are and the huge need for that. And then we have the integrated school, which you might pay up to $5 or $6 grand or whatever fees. And I'm just trying to get the middle bit. So I'm putting aside the fee structure for one moment, but I just want to focus on the public access issue, because what I want is equity, right? And I'm just working out the word, the public access and community access. So what sort of requirement, number one, would be for any state integrated school to actually just absolutely emphasise that when they come for this remission, that there's a deal there, local community access? Which would be the standard of the state, how they rent out stuff after school hours, all of that stuff.
So you're saying how can they be sure when they embark on their project that they're in the end going to be eligible for this remission?
No, how can we be sure in return for this? The ratepayers are giving, we're giving a remission. How can we be sure that we achieve our policy community public benefit that goes beyond the immediate school community to the wider community?
So you've got a provision in there. What the?
So there's a few provisions within there to make sure that happens. At the moment, there's one in there around the number of hours of community access. There's another one in there around an operational agreement with council and about it being for the life of the building. So there's quite a few criteria in there that will essentially form an agreement with the school prior to them being eligible for the DC remission.
Yeah, and I respect that under our Integration Act, the fees vary and we have no control over that. I just make an interesting observation. But secondly, if we put the settlement centre there and we sort of said, no, that's a state integrated school, right? Apples for apples, what DCs would they pay?
It's easy to just, we essentially don't do this anywhere. So now we're doing something, bespoke for state schools. Then you say, how would it relate to there? Not sure, because that's all new territory. So how would you, determine what the characteristics of a community centre are so that it would get a remission? Like, that's kind of like a new piece of thinking because we don't currently do that. So generally, if places demand on the network, they pay DCs for it. And the thing with this exemption for state schools, it's in the statute, so it's a central government thing. It's not related to DCs. So we are creating policy to carve out a place for state schools, and if the council wish to carve a place out for certain types of community facilities, then we're essentially creating some policy to do that. So I don't have, it's hard to compare things that we haven't developed yet.
So I guess what I'm asking, and look, I'm not arguing, and I acknowledge council, and with respect to some of the submitters, I think it might have been helpful if they had, obviously there's been a journey here, and I couldn't agree with the observation from one of the submitters that this was crumbs. I think with respect to her, it's more than crumbs. But there's a journey, right? And so I totally get the journey, and I totally, absolutely, particularly with the Catholic, but other integrated schools, they're huge community outreach, right? And you've answered that in terms of, the sign and seal the deal. But what I think would be useful to us, and this is about equity and about, our well-beings, forgive me, just bear with me, is that we actually did a bit of a sort of a tabletop exercise, and we said, right, if the settlement centre was a state integrated school, right, and it came to us and said, these are the community benefits, I think we should be knowing what they would pay, because clearly they're not. They're paying under a different system. Now, I know it may be jumping outside this immediate proposal, but I think it's something that we need to address. There may be other ways, as has been made, there may be other ways in which we can actually, on a one-off basis or case-by-case basis, address that.
Yeah, the case-by-case basis, because I have to be straightforward. The policy works in a very engineering metric-based way, so it doesn't have a way to convert sort of community outcomes to dollar DC outcomes. So I don't have a way to get from there to there. I think the way that you work with and the DC policy is limited in some ways. It has its framework, and then the council can choose to provide remissions on the basis of X, Y, and Z. So I think you're asking, what's a good basis to provide a remission for a community centre as compared to the way we do it with a state school? But I think that is a way to, that's still an ad hoc kind of way. So we could provide some guidance or like things that we think comparable community benefits or, that kind of thing. But it's not going to be like a formula in the way that you can do it with transport trips and litres of water and litres of wastewater and things like that.
I mean, in the past, historically, council, have had varying degrees of assistance that's given to, we're going to be talking about redeveloping Celebrating Age Centre or not with Ward Norris. There's decisions coming up in full council around other community facilities. So I guess through the chair, are you able to bring us back some sort of discussion points? I'm not saying we solved that issue. What I would like to know, however, is under current policy, what extra assistance, for example, the submitters from the settlement centre may be able to avail themselves of.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the points would just be a question as to whether your infrastructure recovery policy is the right policy to achieve those ends through. That would, as an open question, I think it's worth thinking about that as well.
Through the chair, I'm just, the layperson. My intent is good, right? But I do want to bow to your own professional expertise in terms of coming back to us with some potential routes to look at. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. I think nearly every one of my questions has now been asked. I have only one left, so I was also interested in the community facility question, and I can see it's complex, so just some broad thinking around how we could approach that would be really helpful. The last one I had was in terms of that the discussion around the settlement centre, and they were saying, well, right now we don't even have that big of an impact on the transport centre. It is their view in terms of at least vehicle movements. What kind of response do we have if an organisation does put a travel plan in place? Like if you look at ACC and they've got very limited car parks, and most of it, people are going to have to find other ways to get there or park elsewhere.
Well, I mean, they have to have, the wording is a suitably qualified expert, so, a transport engineer to provide essentially, valid reasons and why it's sustainable. One of the answers, DC's is recovering money over 30 to 50 years, so you kind of have to think of whatever it is that it sits in behind, reasoning has to be something that's long-term sustainable. So they used to have low-flow taps that people could fit onto their taps, and there's a number of years ago and people wanted remissions because they have low-flow taps, and of course someone just pulls them off and they're not low-flow anymore. So, so what are these things actually, in the long term? The other way people, and I completely understand it, but can't fathom why these sums of money, is because they're funding, the start of the ring road to the completion of the ring road around the city across 40 years, across everyone. So they come, and you have $70,000, and it's like, well, hold on, I've just got some people coming in, to the community facility, so I can completely understand where they're coming from. But the way the framework's set up, it is big dollar long-term recovery, and so if you're going to have solutions, like if you're going to want a remission, you sort of have to be able to show that you're having some impact in terms of that long-term thing. So is a travel plan something that you can be sure will be in place if the use changes and a private, turns into a paid art class school, and I don't know. So the short answer would be usually we like robust, long-term, provable things, because we are, publicly, giving away remissions on DC, so we tend to be wanting, pretty solid evidence. So that's probably the short answer. But look, I mean, if elected wing wants to take a more, a more social view, say, across some of these facilities, and it wants to use this policy to do it, then I think you can, and we need to think carefully and make sure that you do it properly. But you probably have to flex on some of these things that we would typically be a bit tougher on, I guess, perhaps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions from me around the greater good for community centres. Is there any precedent or example of people factoring in? You give us this amount of community social benefit, therefore you get. Are any examples of that? I know it's really hard to quantify community.
I mean, I've got a couple in my head. I think what more happens, if you're talking about other councils, is that they want to not charge this community facility development contribution, so then they'll, find some valid community and other reasons to do it. But I don't think it's a good idea to try and come up with a method of doing it where you get a remission of X, Y, Z. That's why I think it at the discretion of the council within these boundaries, set a policy provision. But it's effectively the elected members deciding, that specific facilities you didn't want to charge. That would be my thoughts.
It's a bit of work, but I wouldn't mind understanding if there's what other levers there are for us to support significant community centre projects.
Sorry, Jeff's got to go. I'm just wondering, do we have quorum for this?
No, we don't.
Should we just vote on it and then continue the conversation later? Because it's still going to be captured.
But yeah, well.
Technically, the point of the session is to receive the report and to the submission. So we could, and then
quorum the other day actually.
And what we could have is a case of going and voting through and any matters that have not been able to be raised.
Is it urgent,
offline?
Jeff?
Oh, it's just a pickup.
Yeah, as in further information from members that are also not here today, if they were to provide them to Greg and Tiki, that would be valid.
We could, but just note that I have been called upon to stay in meetings for quorum myself before, and I'm very busy as well. I'm not, no personal around this, Jeff. If you have to go, you have to go, but just... I know. A unifying force for good. I try to be that too. I'll be very quick. Just a couple of things, just if that's okay. Thanks, Jeff, for your indulgence on this. Just a bit of work around what would that look like if it were a catch-all for all community centres. I presume Cote Pacifica, because they have some commercial, they pay their DCs. So just wonder what it would look like. How big is that? If we open that Pandora's box, how big is it? But also, because I am favourable to supporting things with community outcomes, what other tools we may have. You're alluding to some, Jeff, some Greg. So you don't need to tell me now. Just that's the sort of level of feedback. The other thing this is the last area that concerns me, and it should probably concern everyone. I think some of the people that Mr. Jones talked about must be squirming in terms of his comments around them. But I'm going to put that all personal stuff aside and just want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. So he's made some pretty broad statements about illegalities in the Future Proof project, which I'm not sure I agree with, but I need to make sure that that is not the case. He made some comments about the national policy statements, but as far as I'm consider, they're not applied retrospectively. So we do our work and our assessments, our financial assessments on a point in time, and we review them, right? But I'd like to understand that. I'd like other councillors to hear that in the thing. So do need to understand what's going on with Future Proof. The Infrastructure Commission and the Productivity Commission he referred to, we've all been furnished with those reports before, and we understand that's a general report on the cost of infrastructure going forward. So the other thing is that just around the confidentiality, privacy clauses, just understanding how that works. Now, I understand the commercial importance of keeping things private, especially when you're doing deals and, you know, trying to get the best deal for the ratepayer. But just want to understand how that private development agreement situation works at a high level, so that we can assure the public after the on the decision-making day that all is well in that space and that we're doing everything with integrity and legality. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just quickly on so we don't do deals on DCs, so those private developer agreements essentially just encode policy DCs. There may be all sorts of other considerations about crossing other people's property and all sorts of things that might need to be in a private agreement, but the DCs are, so I'd say that Mr. Jones is incorrect about
well, he talked about
assumption.
private development agreements, and I wrote his exact words down, and he talked about confidentiality, privacy clauses. I just need assurance from staff that what we're doing is legal
Absolutely.
and appropriate.
I'm just trying to give you my, but narrow form in terms of what I have into them is there's really nothing to hide there.
But remembering not all councillors are here, so everybody needs to have access to the same.
I'll touch base with
I'm done, Jeff. Jeff. Martin.
Very quick, and obviously, you know, the fellow is future-proof, also, you know, natural justice, all of those things, of course. Sorry, you're going to get the list. The claim was made about where it's only us in Tauranga don't do a remission, and is that 100%, don't do a 100% remission, or is it a 50% remission? So I presume the diocese would give us those figures.
Yeah, we'll have to do a bit of research. It's always a bit clunky trying to find that, so we're going to go and do some research around. And
through the chair, I would assume they'll provide you immediately a list, which can be verified. No, I mean, absolutely, a claim has been made by the diocese. I would expect them to give you a written list of all the TAs in this area, and to help us to, you know, they talked about other jurisdictions where there's significant discussion. So I was a bit confused whether we're trending to 100%, you know, but certainly what I did hear is us in Tauranga were the outliers. So I would, if we could write to them and request,
will do.
You know, just clarification of that statement, and you may or may not need to do further research on that. And the reason I'm asking that is I have to take them. I just want to get us. It just helps us with the sense of where we sit. You know, with our colleague TAs. Happy to move.
Thank you. Oh, I know you want to get going. I've got other meetings too. Yeah. Thank you for that. There was just one thing that came to mind. Just anything where we have been accused or it's been suggested illegality. That's my main. May we cross that so that we have assured ourselves. And can you remind council when we come back? Oh, because of Ryan's good question. Can you remind council when we come back to the decision making what was within scope and outside of scope of the court case that we were vindicated in terms of DC policies? Because he suggested that it was very narrow, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands.
Yeah, it was the opposite. It was very broad. I'd say. Yeah, but for the wider audience of council and whomever public may be listening to the meeting on that day, so that we all have the same information. Thank you. That's it. Ryan Hamilton has moved. Sarah has seconded. All in favour? You are free. Free as a bird. Yeah. Sorry.